Katoa. Nei rāna mihi o te wā ki a koutou e tau nei, keiko nei I tēnei rā, tēnei rangi mukapuna, no mai, haere mai. On behalf of the board and Team Meridian, welcome to you all. Thank you for being with us today at this ASM. He whakaro he mihi ki a rātou e mau ana na mana o hēnei whenua a tāhua, koutou anō na iwi o te motu, no te toka ki te raki ahi Australia anō. Me ngā hāpori. We also acknowledge those holding traditional authority over these lands, the tribal groups that we work with from the deep south through the country and increasingly in Australia as well, and all of the communities that we work with across our operations. Me kati, me whakaro ki a rātou ki wihi ai ki te pō, koutou, o te wiki nei, marama nei, o te tau I pāhure nei, Papa Kevin Mā, haere, haere, haere atu. Rātou ki a rātou, tātou te hongora e tau nei I tēnei wā tēnā no koutou. We take a moment to remember those that we've lost, those that have passed away in recent weeks and months and across the year. Remember them and shed a tear, and then release them, let them go, and we return to the purpose of the day, the conversations of the day in this time and space. So again, welcome. Ahakoa he tino poto tahaku nei paipa, he mihi matakuikui tēnei, ngā mātou te poari, te kamupini nei ki a koutou. Despite the shortness of my metaphorical pipe, the few words used at this part of the day, this is the warmest of welcomes from Meridian to you all. Thank you for being here. Kia ora.
Thank you, Anaki. Tēnā koutou katoa. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I am Chris Moeller, Chairman of Meridian Energy. On behalf of the board and management, I welcome everyone to the meeting, in particular Justin Anderson and Matthew Appleby from the New Zealand Treasury representing the Crown. I would also like to acknowledge the attendance of former Director Steve Reindler and Trevor Deed, the company's lead audit partner from Deloitte. Meridian is a very health and safety conscious company. In the unlikely event of an emergency, you are requested to adhere to the following procedures to ensure your safety. If you hear a long alarm signal accompanied by a voice prompt asking everyone to evacuate, please leave the room by the nearest safe exit as directed by Eden Park staff or security, who will be wearing white shirts and black jackets featuring the Eden Park logo. It is likely that the nearest safe exit will be down the stairs to Gate G, through which you entered the South Stand, or alternatively through Gate F, the exit for which is located on your left, my right over there, at the eastern end of the stand and has a green and white sign above it. You are requested to move quickly, but please do not run or attempt to use the lifts. The assembly point is on the footpath beside Remus Avenue, which is across the car park from gates G and F. Please remain there until the all clear is given to re-enter Eden Park. At the exit area, you will find a notice that clearly outlines this evacuation procedure. Finally, on health and safety, if you see anything unusual, please report this to security or any of the other event staff. In terms of housekeeping, Eden Park is a non-smoking venue and bathrooms are located on this level through the foyer you entered this room, or alternatively in the western foyer on your left. Moving to the order of business today, I declare the 2018 meeting open. This meeting has been duly convened and a quorum is present. The minutes of last year's meeting have been posted on Meridian's website and are held by the Company Secretary. I will now introduce the Meridian Board and Management sitting beside me on the stage. On my immediate left is Deputy Chairman Peter Wilson. Next to Peter are Directors Mark Cairns and Anaki Goodall, who together with Peter are standing for re-election at this meeting. On the left of Anaki is Chief Executive Neil Barclay and the Company Secretary Jason Steen. Next to Jason are Directors Jan Dawson, Mary Devine and Mark Verbeest. Meridian participates in the Institute of Directors Future Directors program. This involves an aspiring director attending all board meetings with full speaking but no voting rights. Meg Matthews is our Meridian IOD Future Director. I will say more about Meg in my Chairman's address, but in the meantime I would like to introduce her to the meeting and will ask Meg to stand. Thanks, Meg. The business of the meeting is as set out in the notice of meeting and will commence with my Chairman's address. Neil Barclay will then review the group's performance and share some of his insights as Chief Executive of the company. This will be followed by a general question and answer session on matters relating to the management and operations of the Meridian Group. We will then move to consider the 3 resolutions set out in the notice of meeting. Finally, at the close of the meeting, you are invited to join Meridian's board and management for refreshments. I will now move to my Chairman's address. Last year, our annual shareholder meeting was held less than 24 hours after the announcement of the new coalition government. Since that time, there have been a number of significant, mainly positive changes to our operating environment, due principally to Meridian being a 100% renewable energy company. The coalition government is pursuing a busy and ambitious sustainability agenda, including looking to ensure New Zealand delivers a low emissions economy as the planet grapples with the challenges caused by climate change. The country's largely renewable electricity system will be a key part of a lower emissions future, as electrification offers the opportunity to remove up to 32 million tonnes of carbon caused by the use of fossil fuels in the road transport sector, by the manufacturing, construction and commercial industries, for domestic heating, and by the electricity generation industry itself. We welcome the zero carbon bill introduced by the government, including the establishment of a climate commission, and as at 1 July this year, Meridian is a net zero carbon organisation across our operations. Meridian intends to play a significant role towards New Zealand becoming zero carbon by helping our customers and our partners to make this transformation possible. The government is also considering the fiscal and social well-being of New Zealanders, which in our industry is evidenced by the current electricity price review. Meridian mainly supports the issues paper that the panel released in September. The paper confirmed that the New Zealand electricity market is one of the best performing markets in the world and achieves top rankings for security, sustainability and energy equity. As an industry, we are currently ranked 8th overall in the world by the World Energy Council, and that is the only country, we are the only country outside of Europe to feature in the top 10. The Productivity Commission also released a report this year about how New Zealand could transition to a low emissions economy. It too determined that the New Zealand electricity sector and market is delivering and will continue to do so for the foreseeable future. The Electricity Price Review Issues Paper also noted that the sector is not making excessive profits. It did, however, find some areas of possible policy improvements, including the impact of prompt payment discounts and support for financially vulnerable and non-switching customers. Meridian believes these issues can be addressed by some simple solutions that improve equity but still maintain New Zealand's competitive electricity market. In his Chief Executive's address, Neil will speak to these matters in further detail. In Australia, electricity price transparency and affordability are also being heavily scrutinised, with reviews by both the federal and state governments. The ACCC, Australia's competition regulator, has proposed a number of changes to improve energy affordability in a market where average residential electricity prices are now 40% higher than here in New Zealand. Policy attempts to transition Australia to a more decarbonised energy economy system are falling victim of the ongoing political instability in that country. As a small renewable generator and retailer in Australia, the market and political disruptions may offer opportunities. However, I emphasise that we remain very focused on managing any risks that may be involved. I will now turn to the shareholder highlights for the year. Although it is a well-worn cliche, but one that is perhaps appropriate at this venue, the 2018 financial year was a game of two halves. Due to significant hydrology challenges, EBITDA in the first half of 2018 was 7% down on the prior year. However, for the full year, we turned that around and delivered a result that was higher than the previous year by 1.4%. Obviously, the weather gods treated us kindly in the second half of the year, but it is also a tribute to our staff and their capability to manage our water resources. Indeed, this is the second year in a row that Mike Rowan and his trading team have managed the combined vagaries of the weather, demand and water availability to optimise our results. Total dividends paid to shareholders during the 2018 financial year were also 1.9% higher than the previous year. Combined with a 7% increase in the share price, the total shareholder return for the year to 30 June 2018 was 14%. Meridian has now delivered double-digit returns to its shareholders in each of the 5 years since the company was listed, thereby handsomely eclipsing the returns available from interest-bearing securities. Although we are still 2 years away from the conclusion of the original 5-year capital management program that commenced in 2015, the board has decided to extend the current capital management program by a further 2 years, with the intention of increasing the original return of capital to shareholders by a further $250 million, from a total of $625 million to $875 million. As was the case with the first 5-year tranche of the capital management program, the board reserves the right to cancel or suspend the new 2-year tranche of the capital management program in light of possible future impacts on the financial position of the company and alternative uses of capital. 2018 also saw a game of two halves in terms of our executive leadership. Mark Binns officially retired as Chief Executive on the 31st of December 2017, and Neil Barclay took over from Mark the following day. I paid tribute to Mark's contribution to the company at last year's annual meeting, so I won't repeat myself today. However, suffice it to say, Mark did an outstanding job in leading Meridian through its initial public offering and thereafter, and in my view, Meridian shareholders owe him a significant debt of gratitude. The board appointed Neil as Chief Executive without following so-called best practice by conducting both an internal and external search for Mark's replacement. The board and Mark had worked hard to create a succession plan for Neil by exposing him to all facets of the business through his former roles as Chief Financial Officer, General Managers Markets and Production, and General Manager Retail, the three most senior roles in the company, excluding the position of Chief Executive. After interviewing Neil, the board concluded it would not be appropriate to go to market due to the uncertainty that would be created by delaying an appointment, the costs that would be incurred, and frankly the lack of integrity involved when a decision to appoint Neil had already effectively been made. The board remains delighted with the way Neil's appointment was received, both internally and externally, and after 9 months as Chief Executive, he has continued Mark's excellent work, albeit, as one would expect, with his own style and emphasis. More recently, the board unfortunately lost its longest-serving director, Steve Reindler, because Z Energy, of which he is also a board member, acquired a majority interest in Flick Electric. As Flick is a competitor of Meridian, Steve, having quite rightly been excluded from the deliberations surrounding the transaction at Z, found himself with a conflict of interest, which was not able to be managed without him resigning one of his 2 directorships. Steve elected to stand down from Meridian because his tenure on the board was likely coming to an end in 2019 in any event. Steve's passion for our organisation, in particular around safety, our assets and sustainability, including chairing the Safety and Sustainability Committee, will be greatly missed. On behalf of the board and management of the company, I want to publicly thank Steve for his very significant contribution to Meridian, not least because it was he who first suggested that Mark Binns should be invited to be our Chief Executive. Thank you, Steve. At yesterday's board meeting, the directors agreed to consider the process regarding Steve's vacancy, the board evaluation undertaken by an independent third party during the year, which included the development of a revised director competency matrix, will be used to underpin this process. At the start of the meeting, I introduced you to Meg Matthews, who is Meridian's Institute of Directors' future director. This is a program designed to provide aspiring directors with experience and exposure to some of the most significant boardrooms in this country. Normally, the term is for a year, but by mutual agreement, we extended Meg's tenure to 18 months. Meg hails from Ngaitahu, our iwi partner, and has found her time attending Meridian board and committee meetings of significant benefit. She chaired one meeting of the Remuneration and Human Resources Committee, which has given Meg the confidence to take on 2 chair roles in other organisations. Meg has been a delight to work with, but sadly, her time with Meridian finishes today, and we wish her all the very best for the future. Director Mary Devine has been instrumental in mentoring Meg, and I sincerely thank her for that. Yesterday, the board resolved to endeavour to appoint another aspiring director as Meg's successor because the board believes it is important that Meridian plays a role in developing the depth and breadth of the director talent pool in New Zealand. To conclude, I want to thank the members of Meridian's board, management, employees, customers, iwi, business partners and our communities for their continued support. And of course, sincere thanks to you, our shareholders, for continuing to invest in Meridian. I now invite Neil Barclay to address you for the first time as Chief Executive. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Kia ora koutou. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to talk to you about Meridian and what we believe has been a very solid year performance. Meridian's continued success is very much down to a team effort. So I'd first like to take the time to thank the board for being highly engaged and very supportive of management, and for giving me the job. Well done. And I'd also like to acknowledge the entire Meridian crew for their ongoing commitment. We're very, very fortunate to have a very smart and dedicated team at Meridian. We have the executive team here today who lead that team, and I'd like to introduce them all to you. So if you could stand as I call your names out, guys. We've got Mike Roan, GM of Wholesale. Ig McManus, CEO, Meridian Energy Australia. Guy Waipara, GM Generation Natural Resources. Julian Smith, Chief Customer Officer. And you've been introduced to Jason Steen, General Counsel and Company Secretary. And we've also got Sarah Nielsen, Acting GM of HR. Now, missing today are Paul Chambers, our CFO, who is attending an investor conference in Singapore and hopefully building demand for Meridian shares, and Jackie Cleland, our real GM of HR, who is enjoying a well-earned break at the moment. Meridian continues to lead the market as an authentic, sustainable business. We've been committed to producing clean energy for a long time now, around 17 years in fact. And that's something that we're very, very proud of. So it's great to see the growing momentum behind New Zealand's climate action and decarbonisation aspirations. As a country, we must demonstrate global leadership, I believe, by stepping up to this challenge, and frankly, all other challenges pale in comparison. Beyond clean energy, we're putting our efforts into ensuring we lead by example, managing our own environmental footprint and that of our customers. Some of the more high-profile initiatives that we have underway include conversion of more than 50% of our passenger fleet to pure electric vehicles. We will increase that to 90% by 2020. Now, the financial case for this conversion stacks up, and I'm sure it does for most businesses, and it is important that businesses take the lead, as that will create a second-hand market and make these vehicles available to ordinary Kiwis. We're also actively looking to the replacement for the Genesis swaption agreement that runs to December 2022. The swaption agreement is backed by coal generation largely, and we're seeking a cleaner solution for the future. In doing that, we're mindful that the choices we make need to actively contribute toward our national goals of decarbonisation of the economy and maintaining a reliable electricity system. We've driven our direct carbon emissions per person down by 17% in the last 5 years, but we need to do more. And as Chris mentioned, as of 1 July, we are net zero carbon across all Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions for our business. And shortly, we are commencing a native tree planting program, mostly on our own land, to grow our own credits and to ensure we become net zero carbon for all emissions, including Scope 3. Scope 3 emissions are those created by our suppliers on our behalf. So we'll be in that position by 2025. Over the ditch, we've galvanised Meridian's green credentials, and we are the only energy company in Australia that offsets all carbon emissions. So we're well ahead of the wider market there. As a result, Meridian has maintained our inclusion in the Dow Jones Sustainability Index. We remain one of only 3 companies in New Zealand to do so, and it is important for us to maintain that third-party endorsement of our sustainability credentials, we believe. As I mentioned earlier, our success as a business is a direct result of the quality of the team. So we will continue our unrelenting commitment to the safety and well-being of our people. I'm very pleased to confirm that in the last year, we've had no serious harm injuries, but the thing I'm most proud about is that through our annual staff engagement surveys, we know that 97% of our people strongly believe that the company and their managers care about their safety and well-being. Also, we continue to build our diverse and inclusive culture. We're doing a lot here, but a few tangible outcomes that demonstrate progress include: we've been recognised as a silver finalist at the YWCA Equal Pay Awards. We have effectively achieved pay parity for the parent company. We have become an accredited rainbow tick organisation, and we also have extended our paid parental leave entitlements to align with the government's new policy. Ultimately, it's important that everyone at Meridian can confidently bring their whole selves to work. It allows us to be much more successful and authentic, and it permeates how we operate through our customer-facing brands. As Chris said, we've had another really pleasing financial result this year. It's the context for that result, I think, that we're most pleased about. Our ability to generate electricity in New Zealand was limited during the year by 2 significant dry periods where our hydro catchments didn't get as much rainfall as we would have normally have expected. As a result, our overall generation volumes were the lowest since 2013. But despite this, we delivered a 1.4% increase in EBITDAF. Now, there are many factors that went into the result, but certainly an important enabler of this has been the maturing of the electricity hedge markets in New Zealand over the last 7 or 8 years. As a 100% renewable and mostly hydro generator, we sometimes must buy energy from our competitors to be able to meet our customer commitments, and liquid hedge markets allow us to do that efficiently. Also, and not to be underplayed, our strategy to diversify our business and focus on retail and focus on our overseas growth opportunities is delivering. Customers, they expect choice, they expect great service, and providing our customers with an exceptional experience must be our focus. During the last year, Powershop and Meridian brands together grew customer connections by 14,000 in New Zealand, which was the strongest growth in customer connections in the New Zealand electricity sector. An important factor in our success has been our ability to reduce Meridian's customer churn, which is currently the lowest amongst the large electricity retailers. We're proud that we've reduced our customer disconnection rate by 80% in the last 5 years, whilst at the same time reducing our bad debt losses dramatically. As an industry, it is incumbent on us to lift our game when we're dealing with our most vulnerable customers, and we believe we're doing that. You would have hopefully seen recently that we decided to replace prompt payment discounts with a guaranteed discount that isn't tied to the due date of a person's bill. Every customer still gets the same savings, but what is fair is that those who may miss their bill due date for whatever reason aren't unreasonably punished by losing their discount. We believe that the practice of clawing back prompt payment discounts is fundamentally unfair because the penalty to the customer far exceeds the cost of chasing the debt to us. The cost of this decision to Meridian is about $5 million per annum. We believe we can absorb this. We can also create a leadership position and further grow loyalty amongst our customer base, which is ultimately in the best interests of shareholders. To continue to stay ahead of the pack over the next 3 years, we are transitioning Meridian's 225,000 customers to the Flux Federation software platform. Our Powershop brands in New Zealand, Australia and the UK are already using this platform, so we are confident, based on their feedback, that it will improve the experience we offer to our customers and help us lower our overall cost to serve. Powershop New Zealand has expanded its product mix this year with the launch of 3 innovative products and a strong focus on customer loyalty. They also won the 2018 Consumer New Zealand People's Choice Award for Electricity Retailer. And in Australia, Powershop has once again been recognised as Australia's greenest company by Greenpeace. They have delivered a gas retailing proposition to customers in Victoria, a white label business targeting solar customers, and a number of other industry-leading innovations, including a virtual power plant and demand response programs. If you want to know what a virtual power plant is, I suggest you talk to Ed McManus over a cup of tea later on. We've also strengthened our relationship with our largest customer, New Zealand Aluminium Smelters, by supporting them with an additional 50 megawatt baseload energy solution that's enabled them to increase production at the smelter at Bluff. The fact that NZAS are choosing to invest in increasing production at that smelter is obviously a good sign for the longevity of the smelter. It's also a very good sign for the southern region and good for the environment, because NZAS leverage New Zealand's largely renewable electricity system to make some of the greenest aluminium in the world. That's a fact. As Chris noted, the government is conducting an electricity price review. We're mostly supportive of the review panel's findings to date, but it's fair to say there are some aspects of the panel findings that we are less than lukewarm about. The review's issues paper discusses options to support customers who choose not to switch electricity retailer regularly. The inference is that customers who don't switch are not getting the best deal. We don't necessarily agree with the review panel's conclusion in that regard. Over the past year, we know that 55% of New Zealanders actively considered switching their retailer, and a fifth of those who considered it actually did it. We think that this shows that people largely understand the choices on offer, and they make their choices accordingly. The review has also identified that there's a large number of New Zealand households in energy hardship. Now, I believe that Meridian has stepped up to the plate in many ways to support customers who struggle to afford to pay for their power. We put a lot of emphasis on developing our customer hardship program, and as a result, we have some of the lowest disconnection rates in the industry. I also referred earlier to what we've done to stop clawing back prompt payment discounts, which we know disproportionately impact the most vulnerable customers in our society. But it's also important to acknowledge the reasons some customers struggle to pay their power bills are complex, and it can't all be fixed by electricity retailers alone. We get a strong sense that from the review panel that they are seeking to consult heavily on the issues paper, and we are very heavily engaged in that process. We did note modest demand growth in the last year of around 0.8%. It looks likely that continued positive macro factors are driving this despite overall warmer than average temperatures. We're not expecting to see any dramatic change from current demand trends in the medium term, say through to the middle of next decade. That said, it is likely one or two large-scale new renewable projects will be built within the next 4 or 5 years to meet that demand growth. From 2025 onward, the picture looks very interesting. Much of New Zealand's existing remaining coal and gas generation is old and may need to be replaced. And if we are to achieve zero carbon by 2050, then renewable electricity must play a huge role in that. So it's fair to say that most views of electricity demand growth over the long term are becoming far more bullish. We continue to invest in the development pipeline that will allow Meridian to take advantage of that growth as it occurs. The key to success is negotiating flexible resource consent conditions that enable a greater window of time before having to commit to build the new generation and to allow for technology improvements. To achieve zero carbon by 2050, New Zealand is likely to need between 1 and 3 mid-sized wind farms to be built every year from the back of next decade through to around that 2050 timeframe. So that's going to change the nature of our landscape. We need to start having conversations about how we achieve this and what the trade-offs might be. Renewable developers like Meridian are very focused on building respectful and enduring relationships with the communities to ensure they also benefit from having a power station in their area. But a more balanced RMA framework, supportive of renewable electricity projects, is also needed. The political volatility that Chris referred to in Australia has gone hand in hand with volatile prices in the electricity market. Average energy prices have risen by 59% over the last 2 years, and managing retail margins in that kind of environment can be challenging. Accordingly, for the past 18 months, we've stopped growing the customer base at PowerShop Australia. We did this until we could procure more cost-effective supply to support future retail growth. We've now done that, and through the acquisition of the Green State hydro assets and by signing 2 long-term power purchase agreements from new renewable generation projects. So whilst Australia remains a tough landscape for operations, we are confident we can manage the risks, and we are pushing for renewed growth in our Australian PowerShop brand. We have a strong green position, a genuinely differentiated product in PowerShop, and to me, success looks like a business several times larger than it is today. In the UK, we have licensed the PowerShop brand and the Flux platform to our partner npower. They commercially launched their business in January this year and are making steady progress. As at the end of September, they had 46,000 customers on the book. It's early days, but given the size of the UK market, the upside potential could be very significant. So the outlook for FY19 is good so far. We don't provide financial forecasts to the market because the weather in this country is so very fickle, and we rely on that weather. What I can tell you is our catchments have slightly less water in them than average for this time of year, and that's the same across the rest of the country. This below average storage is one of the reasons why we're seeing high wholesale prices for electricity at the moment. It's worth noting that we are moving into a time of seasonal rainfall and snowmelt, so conditions are likely to improve. And certainly we have started the year in far better shape than at the same time in 2017. If I look beyond the next few years, I'd make the following comments. In terms of stability, our core New Zealand market is mature. It does deliver sustainable, efficient and reliable outcomes for New Zealand. The Meridian generation assets form the backbone of the industry, and as a result, Meridian is inherently a very strong business. And I believe we're managing the operational risk of variable hydro inflows better than we've ever done in the past. We continue to invest in our retail business in New Zealand, and whilst competition is fierce, we have 2 exceptional brands, and I see the potential for further profitable growth and more efficient operations. We will also continue to diversify our earnings through our strengthening our position in Australia and in the UK, and by expanding our Flux platform offer. So the fundamentals for our business remain very sound, and a much stronger national focus on climate action can only be good for the electricity sector and for Meridian. We have the expertise and the balance sheet capacity to participate in the growth of renewable electricity that must occur if our country is to achieve zero carbon by 2050. Thank you very much. Hand it back to Chris.
Thank you, Neil. In the notice of meeting, we invited shareholders to submit questions in writing prior to the close of business last week. We received 2 questions by that deadline. The first asked where Meridian will stand in the next 5 years in terms of profitability and stability. The second asks what is the rationale for discontinuing the discount for loyal customers who always pay on time each month. Neil has already addressed both questions during his speech because they are important matters to all shareholders, not just those attending today's meeting, and all shareholders need to be aware of those matters. This is made possible because every year we release the Chair's and Chief Executive's addresses to the Stock Exchange at the commencement of this meeting. So accordingly, I will now open the floor to other questions. We will accept questions from shareholders, bondholders, or from anyone who has been appointed as a corporate representative. There are 2 microphones set up for questions, which you will see in the centre aisle of the room. If you have a question, please move to the nearest microphone. I realise for some of you that might be a little difficult, but this is important because the meeting is being videoed for the webcast, and it is the only way the online audience will be able to hear the questions you are asking. So if you could please move to the microphone. Once at the microphone, please introduce yourself and then address your question to me as chairman of the meeting. I will then either answer your question or redirect the question to a member of the board or to the chief executive as may be appropriate. Please only raise questions relating to the management and operations of the company at this stage, and hold questions pertaining to the resolutions until that part of the agenda. Are there any questions, please? One over here. Sorry, there's another one at the back and one over here. So maybe you could come forward to the mic there as well. But the lady at the back, could you go first, please?
Okay, my name is Bobby. My question is around the increased investigation and innovation in tidal wave generation. New Zealand being an entirely coastline country, I'm interested to know whether Meridian is also considering that, as well as the wind farm development.
Thank you for your question. Neil, would you like to comment on that, please? Tidal wave generation is the question.
Yep. We keep a close eye on all technological changes, and tidal wave is one that we're watching closely. But the reality is it's still very, very costly. And any time you go into a maritime environment, your costs go up immensely. What we do know is that the most cost-effective new generation in New Zealand for the next 20, 30 years will be, there's a big slab of geothermal still available to the country in the middle of the North Island, and then there's a number of still very attractive wind options. So it's over that sort of time frame that we think we will start to exhaust the wind, and we'll start to look at other types of options like tidal, for example. Thanks, Bobby.
Thanks, Neil. Gentlemen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Martin Ellis. I'm a shareholder. My question relates to your Section C, managing funding. And you made reference in your address, Mr. Chairman, to capital management as a topic. So I'm wondering if you can elaborate on that a little bit to tell us as shareholders what that actually means. In some companies, for example, they're referring to share buybacks, which could arise when a company has surplus cash, decides not to release it in form of dividend stream, which most shareholders would prefer, but instead buy shares back on the market. Is there anything like that in your 5-year plan? For example, I noticed that in the financial year, in the report, share capital in terms of the number of shares actually issued hasn't changed, other than the Treasury shares that you buy for staff entitlement. So let's say that if there was such a proposal, it doesn't seem to be active at the moment. So the question is, what is the future for it? And in answering that, I'm going to ask you for two perspectives. The first is, if there is a share buyback in the market, in the proposals, why would we be sending a representative to Singapore to encourage people to buy shares in the company? And if they were to buy those shares, where would they come from? Would they come from existing shareholders? In other words, to try and increase the share price that way, or would it come from a new issue? And in answering those two questions, the final one would be, we have got a very significant Crown shareholder. And so my concern is, what would be the reaction or response from the Treasury holding the Crown shareholding if we were going to change the share structure of our company? Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ellis, for your question. I'll have a crack at it first and then see whether there are supplementaries to it. The capital management program that I talked of, which is over a 7-year period now, 5 initially, another 2 years added to make it 7 years, covers both special dividends and buybacks. And every time the board considers this at the full year and half year, it does the analysis, or management does the analysis for the board, as to whether it would be in the best interest of shareholders to do a buyback as opposed to pay a special dividend. Because our share price has been reasonably strong, we don't believe as a board that a buyback is appropriate, because it needs to be both fair to the selling shareholders and the buying it back through the company. So there is a tax disadvantage. We acknowledge that, but we do actively consider it all the time. In terms of your question about our CFO being in Singapore, I mean, our management team, our Owen Haxton, who's here, our Manager of Investor Relations, Neil, all work closely with institutional shareholders. Indeed, they work with retail brokers as well, to try and encourage as many people as possible to buy shares on the market. So in terms of the effort in Singapore, it's in conjunction with NZX. It's a joint presentation of a number of New Zealand companies, of which we were invited to be one. And clearly, if we can create some more demand for our shares, then supply-demand, all other things being equal, share price should improve and benefits all shareholders, at least on paper, until you actually sell. So that's the rationale for doing it. Does that cover broadly what you were asking?
I have a question about the Treasury, or rather the Crown shareholding.
Yes, sorry, I did write that down and I forgot. Well, I can't speak for the Crown, obviously. The Crown are represented in this room. It's not appropriate to ask them to speak in this forum. But it's been very clear from the time the national government initiated the MOM process that the policy was a 51% shareholding, and that would be retained. I'm not aware of any suggestion of any change to that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments anybody wants to raise? Lady here, could you move to the microphone in the front row?
Well, this isn't a question. I'm Jenny Merrilees, a shareholder. I just want to thank you, a company, for, as I understand it, you're based in Wellington. Thank you for coming to Auckland so we can all have a look at you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jenny, for those comments. I will comment on the policy of the board around where we hold meetings at the end of the meeting. But we do appreciate that endorsement. Just be nice if another large company in the city hadn't decided to schedule their meeting on the same day, because as I used to be chairman of it, I can assure you I did not schedule their meeting and this meeting on the same day. We might have had more of you here had they not done that. Anything else anybody would like to raise? Gentleman down the back.
Thomas Chaco, shareholder. I was just looking at the forecast of electricity demand, and I was just thinking Meridian's forecast seemed at the bottom end of everything. Wanted to have an idea whether it was being very conservative or not.
They are conservative, and those forecasts were actually completed before the government announced their zero carbon aspirations by 2050. So we're going through a process right now to review how we look at the future, and I think there's more upside in our forecasts. They will probably track somewhere between the bottom and the top forecast, I would have thought. And that's where I say, I think to meet that demand, it's about 1 to 3 mid-sized wind farms per annum. That sort of scale of development's required.
Thank you.
Thanks, Neil. Anything else from anybody? Okay, thank you for your questions and comments. Before we move to the 3 formal resolutions set out in the notice of meeting, I will briefly outline today's voting procedures. Voting will be by way of poll, which means it will be a secret ballot and you will need to complete your voting forms. Persons attending the meeting who are not shareholders, proxy holders or corporate representatives of a shareholder may not vote. This includes bondholders. Many shareholders who are not attending this meeting have already voted. We advise that 1.90 billion votes, representing approximately 74% of the shares on issue, were received prior to the cut-off for voting at 11 a.m. on Wednesday, 17 October. It's my pleasure to introduce and move Resolution 1 to re-elect Mark Cairns as a director of the company. Mark was appointed to the board in 2012 and was re-elected by shareholders at the 2015 annual meeting. The board considers Mark to be an independent director and unanimously recommends that the shareholders vote in favour of his re-election. Mark, I invite you to address the meeting.
Thank you, Chris. Kia ora koutou. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I've been privileged to serve you as a board member for a bit more than 6 years now, joining the board prior to listing back in 2012, and I'm proud of the company's performance in exceeding prospectus projections. I'm also a happy shareholder, very pleased with a total shareholder return of 159% since listing, or an average annual return of 23%. I just wished I'd purchased a few more shares. You have brief details on my background in the notice of meeting. I'm a civil engineer by profession, a fellow of Engineering New Zealand. I've been around large-scale infrastructure most of my working life, with a track record of delivering large projects within time, cost and quality expectations. I've had a good deal of commercial experience in senior management roles at Fulton Hogan and Toll Owens, and I also bring extensive listed issuer experience, having been the chief executive of the Port of Tauranga for the last 13 years. I consider Meridian as a great company with an excellent senior management team. I seek your support to continue for another term as a Director of Meridian. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. I move that Mark Cairns, who retires by rotation and is eligible for re-election, be re-elected as a Director of the company. Is there any discussions or questions or comments? Doesn't appear so. Given that, I have moved the resolution. I therefore now put the resolution. Shareholders should complete their voting papers for Resolution 1. Thanks, Mark. It's my pleasure to introduce and move Resolution 2 to re-elect Anaki Goodall as a Director of the company. Anaki was appointed to the board in 2011 and was re-elected by shareholders at the 2015 annual meeting. The board considers Anaki to be an independent director and unanimously recommends that shareholders vote in favour of his re-election. I call on Anaki to address the meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Kia ora no koutou. I've been also a proud director for some 7 years, served on the Rem and HR Committee and currently serve on the Safety and Sustainability Committee. I guess from my perspective, boards and indeed companies are made up of complementary skills, complementary backgrounds, the different perspectives, insights, approaches, worldviews that people bring in combination to elicit probing and rigorous conversation about future options. My approach, the lenses that I bring to our board discussions are informed by a number of things, but in large parts including 25 years working for Te Runanga o Ngaitahu, the tribal authority in the south, working with Sir Tiffany O'Regan as his claims manager, negotiating and settling and then implementing the Ngaitahu settlement. Working for Sir Mark Solomon and consolidating the tribal institutions within Ngaitahu, ready for the next stage of their growth. I've got long-standing environmental interests. I've served on a conservation board. I'm an establishment board member of the Environmental Protection Authority and served a subsequent term. And I've got broad exposure to community organisations, NGOs, not-for-profits and philanthropic interests, and do a little bit of active work in that space as well. So they're the lenses that, I guess, among others, that I bring to the conversations that we enjoy as a board with the management team. It seems to me that I think you could describe Meridian as a company ahead of its time in a way, and we're in a pretty interesting situation with this large portfolio of 100% renewable assets, this extremely deep talent in the management team, great values, and I think a real preparedness to step up and do at least our share of the heavy lifting and the big changes that are needed as we think about decarbonising our companies and our economy. It seems to me that this company, your company, is extremely well placed for the challenges of the day. I think we're extremely well placed to participate in those changes and transitions profitably, given that all those challenges speak to the very strengths that this company holds. And I think we've also importantly got the opportunity to improve the well-being of our customers and our stakeholders on the way through. It's a tremendous privilege to sit alongside my colleagues here and their deep expertise, shepherding and stewarding this company on all of our behalves as shareholders, and it'd be a great privilege to serve another term. Thank you.
Thank you, Anaki. I move that Anaki Goodall, who retires by rotation and is eligible for re-election, be re-elected as a director of the company. Is there any discussion, comments or questions? There appears to be none. So on the basis of that, I have moved the resolution. I therefore now put the resolution. Shareholders should complete their voting papers for Resolution 2. It is my pleasure to introduce and move Resolution 3 to re-elect Peter Wilson as the Director of the company. Peter was appointed to the board in 2011 and was re-elected by shareholders at the 2015 annual meeting. The board considers Peter to be an independent director and unanimously recommends that shareholders vote in favour of his re-election. Peter, I invite you to address the meeting.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. As Chris has mentioned, I've been a member of the Meridian board since 2011, and I've been Deputy Chairman for the period since that time. I'm also a member of the Audit and Risk Committee for that period, and in the last 2 years have been a member of the Safety and Sustainability Committee. My governance roles more recently have included directorships in the forestry sector, farm supplies cooperative and aged care businesses. My appointments in the banking sector, both in New Zealand and Australia, coupled with appointments across listed entities, government, private, cooperative businesses, evidences my broad-based experience. 3 years ago, when addressing shareholders, I made reference to the soundness of Meridian's strategy, the capability of its management, and the company's strong culture and values. My view is unchanged now, and I am proud to be associated with the company. Meridian has demonstrated its commitment to support the phasing out of fossil fuels, its commitment to play a leading role in advocacy and actions to address the challenges of climate change. And like Anarchy, I believe that Meridian can meet those goals while delivering to all of its stakeholders. My colleagues on the board have encouraged me to stand for a further term, and I'd be grateful for your continued support. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. I move that Peter Wilson, who retires by rotation and is eligible for re-election, be re-elected as a director of the company. Is there any discussion, comments or questions? Again, there doesn't appear to be any matters anybody wishes to raise. I have moved the resolution. I therefore now put the resolution. Shareholders should complete their voting papers for Resolution 3. Thank you for your attendance to the resolutions. On your way out to refreshments, please remember to place your voting papers in one of the ballot boxes which the Computershare staff are now holding at the back of the room. Once all votes have been cast, they will be counted by the company's share registrar, Computershare, and scrutinised by the company's auditor, Deloitte, and the results will be advised to the New Zealand and Australian stock exchanges later today. Consistent with Jenny's comment, as the policy of the board is to rotate the annual shareholders meeting around the main centres of Auckland, Christchurch and Wellington, the current intention is to hold next year's meeting in Christchurch, and all other things being equal, 2021 back here in Auckland, and we seem to be making a habit of Eden Park as our venue, so maybe here as well. I wish you all well for a good long weekend. I thank you for attending Meridian's annual shareholder meeting. I now invite you to join the board and management for refreshments behind you. I declare the meeting closed. Thank you. Take your time.